Hi, and welcome to Parent Topic Night about postpartum planning. We are three of the four members of Arrowhead Birth Collective, and we're a group of doulas and midwives and body workers and doulas in training who want to make doula care more accessible for people up here and who want to help create a supportive culture around birth and the postpartum time. I'm Britt Malik, and I'm a certified birth doula with Childbirth International, and I also work for WIC doing peer breastfeeding counseling. Do you guys want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Laura Bird, and I've been doing births for a few years as a midwife and as a doula, and I'm going through the certification process.
My name is Nikki. I am also doing the doula certification process, and I'm a body worker who loves to work with pre and post pregnant people.
So tonight we're going to talk about postpartum planning. Oh, and I should mention too, Sadie Sigbert, who's not here. She is also a member of Arrowhead Birth Collective, and she's a midwife. And yeah, so we're going to talk about postpartum planning, and the tone will be a little conversational, and then there'll be some time at the end if you guys have any questions. And yeah, we're here to just figure out what it takes to make a plan. It can be way harder to ask for help in the moment. So having a plan can help alleviate some stress, and also kind of help you identify who your care team is and what resources you have. Yeah, communicating about things ahead of time is always a good idea. So the first thing we'll mention is assembling your support team. So that can be who the people in your life are that you feel comfortable and safe with. Maybe that's the partner or family members, friends. Who are the people in your community or in your circle of friends who have the time and resources to support you? So some of that might be, like I said, your family or friends, or also like what is the pool of professionals in your area? So doulas, therapists, body workers, people doing lactation support. And we'll talk a little bit about specifically what's available here in Cook County too. So one thing that can be great to talk about ahead of time is just negotiating what the responsibilities are with your partner. Figuring out what your feeding goals are. If breastfeeding is important to you, figuring out how your partner can support you in that. Finding ways for the two of you to prioritize sleep, discussing returning to work, and knowing things might shift and change once baby comes, but sort of starting to lay some of that groundwork for communicating what your expectations are ahead of time.
Yeah, and there's a lot of ideas that could go into any one of these things. Like, I think we're going to do a follow-up discussion next month about your feeding goals and breastfeeding and lactation, but some things to consider that we can go more into depth with next month is just, like, are you gonna need a pump? Or it's really helpful to have some sort of way to express milk, like a hand pump, or for me, I just thought a hand pump was easier because I didn't want to clean out like tubes and everything, so I didn't get into that. But learning how to, or having that support and connection with maybe a lactation consultant, or there's good books out there that give some really helpful advice about just preparing for breastfeeding. And there's a lot to talk about there, so we can get into that next month. But finding ways to prioritize sleep and talking to your partner, it could be, or your support team, but yeah, it could be ideas of like, are we going to sleep in shifts, or being able to communicate with somebody in your life, like talk to lots of moms who are just like, I just need a sleep clinic, like, please someone help me figure out a way to get a nap today, because you don't want to get sleep deprived, and it's hard not to, but that just exacerbates other challenges and issues that you might have. So, but talking about it prenatally is really helpful, because that's why we're talking about it now, is just get you thinking about it. And it might be, you might come up with some really creative ways to solve some of those sleep issues. Or like returning to work, it's good to get some time in with your employer about creative ways that you could return to work. Like if you have so much time off, maybe it's you have so many full weeks off, but then you go back part-time and extend your maternity leave that way. And there's possibilities of maybe you could bring your breastfeeding baby to work with you, or you take a lunch break where you can go and feed them at daycare, so you are able to still have that breastfeeding time.
And that time, the breaks at work to breastfeed or to pump are like protected by law. So we'll get into some more of that next month too. So yeah, communicating what ways you as the pregnant person want to be supported, and in what ways your partner can support you. I always think about the basics of just eating, drinking, sleeping. And it feels like very fundamental, but if you can allow yourself that beginning postpartum time to just be about that, that's great. That is more than enough. If you are lactating, your caloric needs are higher than even being pregnant. So you actually need 300 more calories a day when you're lactating than when you're pregnant. You'll also likely be thirstier than you've ever been in your life. So thinking about ways that as a partner, making sure that you have a small snack and a water bottle at the ready, because once you kind of like get into your nursing position, it can be really hard to all of a sudden be like, oh no, I'm thirsty and everything's out of reach. So being there in that way, also negotiating how household responsibilities are going to get done, dishes, laundry, cleaning, the things of life that just have to happen. Ideally, in the very beginning, the partner who gives birth is not going to be doing any of that. Ideally, you should be giving yourself ample time to recover. both for your short-term healing and also the long-term health of your pelvic floor. And we'll talk a little bit more about what to expect physically on the next slide, but really thinking about prioritizing rest and prioritizing time in bed, both for the ability to bond with and establish a relationship with your baby. If you're breastfeeding, establishing a breastfeeding relationship, but also just for your own healing. So yeah, finding ways to communicate to your partner that birth is and mentally demanding, and that they should kind of expect to be caring for you as well as the baby in those first few weeks.
And
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, maybe someday we'll touch on this a little bit more, but I was just gonna say, as someone who did not have a partner during this time, it can be extra important to be thinking about these things and setting up systems to support yourself, really like setting up a net of people who you can call, who can take shifts to be there for you, bringing you a water bottle, doing your dishes, letting you take a nap, get a shower. So yeah, it's just really extra important to be thinking about all this stuff if you're not going to have someone living with you.
Yeah, and I was gonna say the same thing, but then also, like, if you have a partner that returns to work, like maybe they don't have any time off, making sure that you are finding help and ways to navigate all that time when you are alone. And yeah, and I'm not sure which slide it's on, but just also to mention that, like, besides the household responsibilities and food and drink and how important all that is, but like just even socializing can be important. And having like even a friend that could stop by, or like just if you need someone to talk to or whatever. I just remember after Redding was born, like I called up a coworker and was like, I just need someone to sit with me, like just sit with that. You don't have to do my dishes. You don't feel like you have to bring a meal, like just sit with me. And like, yeah, so it can be as simple as that. So, think broadly in your spectrum or your list of that you compile prenatally of people or friends you might be willing to call, or how they could help, or people are really, they might offer but they don't know what they could really do for you. But it could be as simple as just having tea or something, so you don't feel isolated and alone.
I think a lot of people conceptualize the postpartum period as this like 6 weeks period, when really there's so much that happens in that first year. And like chances are people in your life want to be there for you. So thinking about not just that like initial postpartum period, but really like throughout that first year, with returning to work, what other kinds of shifts might be happening, and what kind of support you might need. Like the first week after baby is born, maybe you don't want a lot of visitors. Maybe you just want to like hunker down. But maybe it's when someone's returning to work that you'll be wanting more visitors and more meals. And so just thinking about it like that, to just, give yourself a ample grace period. We touched on sleep a little bit. There's like really no magic clear answer for that. It is something that all parents go through, is some amount of sleep deprivation. I think there's like people have done studies to figure out like there's some biological thing that's happening in our brains that where you just got to get through it and trust the process with that. But finding ways that if not just you, but your others in your household are able to get some sleep. And yeah, that can look like setting up in separate rooms. It can look like you said, sleeping in shifts. It can look like really just relying on the net of friends or family. Yeah, to just do what you can and expect to be tired and just try to do less. Another way that people in your life could be helpful is to help navigate communicating with visitors and maybe taking over some of that mental load of like checking who's on the meal train tonight or texting with the person who's bringing stuff over. That can be helpful, or talking ahead of time about like who in your life that might be really excited to meet the baby right away that you might need to like set some boundaries with. And as a partner, knowing that ahead of time can be really helpful so that you can also help set those boundaries.
We had also talked about briefly making a sign for the door, even if you just know that you don't want anyone to knock on the door, that everyone's trying to sleep, or you just don't want any interactions, or your partner goes to work and you're home with the baby, maybe you don't want to deal with anyone. So the partner sort of navigating, like looking ahead to see how they can sort of help create those boundaries so that the mother doesn't have to.
Yeah, I would say especially if you have like dogs that bark when people pull up, or just to like, yeah, get ahead of some of that stuff can save you some annoyances. So we touched on some of this already, but ways that partners can be supportive, feeding you, making sure you have fluids, giving emotional as well as physical support, handling the logistics of visitors. What I hear a lot in my work as a breastfeeding peer counselor is partners wanting to feel like they can be helpful, and that the best way that they can be helpful is by feeding the baby. So they're really excited to like start a baby on a bottle. But if a longer term breastfeeding relationship is important to you, then waiting at least 6 weeks to introduce a bottle can be more beneficial for that initial breastfeeding initiation. So then I have partners be like, well, then what do I do? How do I help? I want to help and I want to like bond with my baby. And I just am here to say that there are so many other ways to be helpful and to bond with baby. If you have a wrap carrier, or even just holding the baby skin to skin, trying different ways to soothe the baby. So instead of just always right off the bat being like, oh, the baby's crying, must be hungry, to just sort of attempt soothing baby in a different way, singing to the baby, shushing the baby, swaying with the baby, being in charge of the bulk of the diaper changing at the beginning, giving baby baths. Yeah, there's a lot of other ways, aside from feeding, that you can bond with the baby.
My body worker brain is saying baby massage is a great way to bond.
Baby massage, yeah. So as far as some things to expect physically, everybody experiences, and this is regardless of your experience of how you give birth. There's going to be some bleeding that lasts from 3 to 6 weeks ish. And this is kind of one of your body's signs to watch. If you notice that you increase your activity and the bleeding gets heavier, or you begin like passing bigger clots, that is often a sign that you need to just like slow down a little bit. So in that way, it can be like a really helpful sort of indicator of how much is too much. Everybody is going to be experiencing healing in your pelvic muscles. So your pelvic floor muscles, especially immediately after birth, will likely be fatigued. It can be really helpful to start doing Kegels right away, pelvic floor exercises, and to avoid stairs as much as possible. And to avoid things that cause strain in the pelvic floor muscle. So straining while you're going to the bathroom, or lifting heavy things, doing any kind of like major load bearing exercises. It's really in your best interest to put those things off while all the muscles in your pelvic bowl are healing. And we will talk a little bit more about this in who's available in Cook County as far as resources go, but Kelsey Saladin is the PT at North Shore Health, and she is wonderful and has a lot of pelvic floor knowledge. And there's actually also a recorded presentation on the Cook County Higher Ed website of Kelsey talking about pelvic floor health. Anything else about the pelvic floor? It's important. You don't want to forget anything.
I think we talk about it later, but some ideas about the steps, like depending on how your house is set up, that comes up later in preparing your space. But just that if you can give your pelvic floor a rest for at least 2 weeks, like a good solid rest, you tend to heal and recover a lot faster. Yeah, so you can, for avoiding steps, you can either set up camp downstairs in your living room if you're close to the bathroom, there isn't a bathroom upstairs, or you just try and limit your trips up and down. So maybe you go up to bed at night and then make a trip down in the morning and bring all of your stuff with you that you need and set up camp downstairs and just stay there and just limit your trips up and down the steps as much as possible.
Again, another experience that everyone has is some amount of sleep deprivation and interrupted sleep. You'll hear people talk about your milk coming in 2 to 4 days after birth. And sometimes that can come with certain physical symptoms of like breast engorgement. Some people's milk comes to full volume and they don't necessarily feel that same kind of like engorgement or firmness. And so there's like a big range of normal. But the thing that kind of goes along with this milk coming in time is that it is a time of like pretty extreme hormonal changes. This is a graph of hormones before or during pregnancy, and then the peak of this triangle or this pyramid is the time of birth. And then, so this is progesterone, estrogen, and prolactin. The prolactin is the dark purple line. And then it kind of branches off. The green line represents prolactin if lactation is encouraged and initiated after birth. And the purple line, part of the line that stays purple, is showing the prolactin after birth if you're not pumping or breastfeeding or removing milk in some way to encourage more milk production. So either way, whether or not you decide to breastfeed, you're going to be having these hormonal shifts during that time. And it's really like around that like 5-day postpartum period, or like 2 to 4 to 5 days, where some of that hormones having peaked and now dropping off. It's when a lot of people notice some symptoms. And yeah, what that might feel like is mood swings or fatigue. Again, with the sleep deprivation, there's probably many reasons to be fatigued when you've just had a baby, but this is sort of the hormonal shifting that's going on that can sometimes also lead to postpartum depression. So just to know that it's a wild ride. It's a pretty intense hormonal time. So I think sometimes knowing that ahead of time and expecting that can sometimes help to have a little bit of perspective. And again, to hopefully give yourself some grace, knowing that this is what's going on. Some physical experiences that some people have, cramping or the after pains, and that can be more intense with each subsequent birth. You might be healing from tears or abrasions, or in some cases an episiotomy. You might be healing from a C-section, in which case you might have an incision that you need to care for, or if you have a C-section, you will have the incision that you'll need to care for. Hemorrhoids, both from being constipated while pregnant or from pushing during labor. Yeah, other bathroom issues, constipation, loose stool, pain with or pooping, emotional symptoms like we just talked about, breast engorgement. Some people might have breastfeeding troubles, insufficient milk production, or sore nipples or cracked nipples. There's something called pubic symphysis pain or dysfunction, which is some people experience while they're pregnant too. And that's referring to the joint that is in the front of your pelvis. So the two sides of your pelvic bone meet in the front, and there's a little cushion of cartilage. And that little joint can become like slightly displaced or stretched, and that is often experienced as a shooting pain And it's often experienced during pregnancy and then goes away after birth. But if it is something that some people experience postpartum, that you can get physical therapy for that. As well as another common condition called diastasis recti. And so it's very normal for it's referring to your muscles in your abdomen separating from one another. And it's like super normal for that to happen during pregnancy, at least to some extent. But it's a condition that, depending on a few different factors, like how you're moving and what kinds of things you're doing postpartum, that can really help heal or exacerbate that condition. So we talked about being mindful in the first couple of weeks postpartum of how you're sitting up from the lying down position. So instead of lying flat and just sitting up as if you're doing a sit-up, to turn to your side and use your hands to help push you up in bed. And also just like avoiding certain abdominal exercises in the first 6 weeks. So yeah, you don't have to start doing crunches right away. Just relax, be mindful. So maybe I'm gonna just skip to, before we talk about how to set up our space, just some things that can help with some of these different things that we just talked about as far as making you more comfortable. So yeah, prioritizing rest and having some things on hand, such as a peri bottle, which is kind of that's a small plastic squirt bottle. And that can be filled with either warm water or warm water with a little bit of Epsom salts, or there are certain sitz bath formulas that some have like healing herbs and Epsom salts in them. But having that at the ready so that when you do go to the bathroom, especially if you're healing from any kind of tears or abrasions, that you can use that bottle to like spray your perineum while you're using the bathroom and after you're done using the bathroom. And then also, as far as like perineal healing, a sitz bath can be really nice. And that is it looks almost like a little bowl that just goes on your toilet. And they don't keep them stocked at the pharmacy, but you can have them order one for you and it will come in a matter of days. And it's basically a way that you can fill a little basin full of warm water or Epsom salts, or some people like to make some kind of like essentially like a healing tea. And then you can sit, and it's a way you can sit on it, and it's a way to like soak all of that in those tissues without having to like fill your bathtub and get in waste. So that can be pretty nice and convenient and comforting.
One way that we have done it at births too is you make like a batch of comfrey tea, and you get like a cookie sheet and you lay out some maxi pads on there, and you pour some of the tea onto each maxi pad so it gets soaked up in there. And then you just pour the rest of it into a pitcher, you put some in a Perry bottle and leave it in the bathroom, but then you can refill the Perry bottle with the tea out of the fridge. It's nice if it's warm or, you know, room temperature, but you can't leave it out if it's gonna be days, but. The Mex pads you get in the freezer, and those are something that's helpful, like more immediately at postpartum, like if you have swelling, the ice packs or the frozen maxi pads help reduce the swelling. So does arnica, which isn't on there, but arnica is great for muscle trauma, bruising, swelling. So it's kind of a nice thing to take postpartum. And
And do you mean not necessarily like topical arnica, but
Right,
the
pellets,
homeopathic
yes.
arnica pellets? Yeah.
And there's also some tinctures that could be added to that list that would help with after pains. Crank bark would be one thing that you can take that helps after pains.
Yeah, and then just like drinking plenty of water and eating plenty of fiber. Some people might opt to use a stool softener the first couple days after birth, especially if you experience any tearing. It can be helpful to make sure that you're like airing away from constipation. So if you're someone who's prone to constipation, that might be something to consider, but and to make sure that you're using what's called a bulk stool softener. And as far as if you have a C-section, again, you're going to want to prioritize rest. Where this differs, and your care provider will probably talk to you about this, but there is a increased risk of blood clots. So it's recommended to get up and take short walks around the house. But you're going to be resting a lot, and you're going to be increasing your activity gradually. And again, with incision care, your care provider will give you instructions about that. And it's typically gentle washing and patting dry. But depending on what kind of stitches, and sometimes there is like a medical tape over the incision, that your care provider will may give you specific instructions around that and what to expect around that. But generally, you're not going to be soaking in a bathtub or like going swimming. Pain medication might be indicated. And again, that's another thing to talk to your care provider about, and let them know if you're planning on breastfeeding or pumping and giving your baby your milk, and they'll help you find a medication that's compatible with breastfeeding. But to expect that the pain should decrease within 2 to 3 days, but that the actual site of the incision could remain tender or appear sort of puffy for up to 3 weeks. And if you're ever like, hey, I don't know, is this normal? Like, just make a phone call. Just call your care provider. Call some trusted perinatal workers in your community. There'll be people to talk you through. And then similarly, same advice around just making sure that you're drinking a lot and getting plenty of fiber. So we'll just go back quick to setting up your physical space. You're really gonna consider it like you're making a nest for yourself. You're gonna be spending a lot of time probably in the house, potentially in bed. So thinking about what you need nearby to be comfortable, making sure that you have all of the pillows or like the lighting or your charging cords for whatever your computer and phone or whatever. And figuring out how to kind of like set yourself up. I think especially if you don't have a partner or if your partner is returning to work right away, thinking about that can be helpful. And again, like how you can avoid stairs. And that's something to consider. Yeah, if your bedroom's on the top floor, but your bathroom's on the first floor, is there another space in your house on the first floor that you can like really set up camp and like make that nest for yourself?
And I added the planning for not having water or electric because I didn't have those when Redding was born. So if it's really nice if you can set up some sort of hands-free way to use your sink, because a lot of times if you don't have running water, it is, you're like pouring something out of a jug or it's can be complicated, but we rigged up was a pump from a boat and a bucket of water, and you just pumped it with your foot so you could have running water and wash your hands and without wasting too much of your water. But yeah, the other things, just like how are you gonna get your waters, who's gonna haul it for you, carry it, and your gray water. And these are things that if people do stop by, it could be like, hey, would you mind hauling this heavy bucket of water out for me, or carrying that heavy bucket of water in for me, or things like that. And cloth diapering, but also setting up, if you've got an outhouse that you're using, you can set up like a composting toilet inside your house so you're not having to make that long trek, which hopefully you figured out during pregnancy because you have to pee so often. But and you can research composting toilets, but yeah, those are just things to consider.
And you mentioned cloth diapering. If that is something that you're at all interested in, I would also recommend that you check out the elimination communication recorded parent topic night that we did a couple months ago with Rachel Shower. She came in and talked a little bit about kind of responding to your baby's like natural elimination cues. And that can be a helpful thing to like learn about or potentially pursue especially if you're off diapering or don't have running water. It feels like a very Cook County thing to be like, yeah, plenty of people here don't have running water or electric.
Which is great because
Perfect
then you
bunch.
can have a wide net to like ask for suggestions. Like people come up with all sorts of awesome creative solutions for that.
Just wanted to like briefly touch on postpartum nutrition, and this might be something that we do a more in-depth parent topic night in the future. But you're ideally going to want food that is warm or warming, like has a lot of warming spices in it, such as ginger or cinnamon or turmeric. Things that are sort of like brothy soup and porridge, that kind of thing. That's going to be like very comforting and easy on your digestion, especially in those first couple days. And again, with some of those warming spices, things that are considered more anti-inflammatory. So turmeric is great, ginger is great. Pineapple, green veggies, and prioritizing getting enough protein and fiber. I really love oatmeal for some of its lactation promoting qualities. And yeah, there's some really nice herbal tea blends out there that have things that in them that can kind of be really nutritive or support lactation or support general uterine healing. So there's other places to learn more about that more in depth, but just wanted to touch on that being an important piece. And so, that being said, if you are going to be setting up a meal train, which I would highly recommend everyone who's having a baby look into, it's basically a online place where people can sign up for specific slots of time to come and bring you a meal. And it's a really great, easy way to like plug people in who want to support you. And so being thoughtful when you're setting that up. I think there's this tendency some of us have, or at least I know I have, of being like, well, I don't want to like seem like I'm too much trouble by having like dietary preferences, but it actually is super helpful for the people who are signing up for your meal train to have some of parameters. So don't be afraid to like get really specific about the kinds of things that you want to eat during this time.
Or even extend that to your whole family. Here are the dietary restrictions of my family, and like if you're going to bring us a meal, like you said, it's helpful to be as specific as possible. And I always really appreciate like a very detailed meal train intro.
Yeah, and maybe this is like a subsequent child and you have older children who have their own dietary preferences, or like someone in your family has allergies, like all of that detail can be really helpful to put in.
And one more thing about the meal train is I've had some families who set it up and they find that they get like, big casserole, big pot of soup, like lots of big things. And if it's a small family, you can either portion that out and throw some of it in the freezer and save it for a later day, or like spread out your meal train days so that you get a meal one day and you have a day off to eat leftovers, and then you get a meal another day, and it's a way to stretch out that time that people are bringing you food, but just something to consider.
It's so great. It's such a gift. The meal train.
Yeah.
I have vivid memories of the food that I
Every
have
meal.
eaten.
Yes.
Right. Where I'm just like, you're so grateful for them.
Mhm.
So, and then here's just a few things around the birth considerations that again sort of like makes sense to talk about prenatally. And some of this is more for the actual birth experience, and some of it is more postpartum. But these are some of the things that if you are giving birth in a hospital, it might make sense to either like talk about or at least know about the policies of the specific facility that you're going to be in. So knowing ahead of time what pain medication or comfort measures will be available to you and what your interest is in all of those things. And that can be anywhere from a birth doula to yeah, an epidural or everything. There's lots of different things to do and a lot of different, um, and everybody's experience is so different. So just knowing what the full range of tools are going to be available for you for coping during birth. And then also what the sort of policies are around different preferences. If you're either planning a cesarean or if there's a chance that you might end up with one, then it can sometimes be nice to know what the policies are around like how many people and who can be in the room and policies around eating and drinking. If skin to skin time right after birth is important to you, like letting your care providers know so that they can help you prioritize these things. Also what your thoughts are on cord clamping and what you want to do with the placenta, bathing and dressing the baby, what your plan for feeding is, your thoughts on pacifiers, and then what kinds of procedures and tests for the baby are available and what are the things that you like want to have done or want to postpone or want to opt out of. So thinking about like what the, and again, you can ask your midwife or your OB and they can, or your birth doula, and they can like walk you through more of that in depth too, so that, yeah, you can just know what there is to know. And also, yeah, it's more commonplace now that it's the default for babies to like room in. But if your care facility has any specific policies around rooming in, or like some places are really strict about like co-sleeping, and then what kinds of like privacy or guest policies there are. So just some questions to consider ahead of time. So here is a list of community resources, and maybe we can try to link to some of these on the page for the recordings. Yeah, I think lastly, just know that the 6 week time frame, you don't have to hold that as like a gold standard. That like healing isn't always linear. You're gonna have some ups and downs, and just to like give yourself a lot of grace during this time. The amount of both like hormonal and just like logistic changes that happen from like having a 1-day-old baby to having a 1-year-old baby. Like things, the goalpost is shifting constantly. So just to give yourself grace and not put too much pressure on things being a specific way. We plan so that we can alleviate some stress, not so we can create more unrealistic, stressful goals for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's about all we have for today. There's one last slide that has some more mental health resources on if depression or anxiety during or after pregnancy is something that you experience. And we can link to some of those too.
All the resources will be there.
Yeah. Cool, thanks. Yeah, so that was a lot. And if there's any questions, we're here for questions.
My only comment would be make sure there's somebody that can help us sort baby clothes. Because the sizing baby clothes never matches necessarily to the. That's how
Or all the tags are cut off.
It's like,
pull it up. That's a good job of assigning somebody else.
totally.